I like doing TV reviews. For the most part, there's an element of pass-fail to them. The objective nature of doing TV reviews takes a little of the pressure off of me as a reviewer. There are standards for everything when it comes to TVs, whether we're talking about a standard dynamic range signal or HDR, color, contrast, you name it. A TV either hits its mark or it doesn't. The last OLED Samsung sent us for review was the S95C back in 2023. We've covered other Samsung TVs since then, but man, has it been a while since we've had one of their OLEDs. So long, in fact, that the S95F has been a pleasant surprise. Its matte screen is a pretty big departure from our last experience with the S95C and even from recent OLEDs from LG and Sony. For those of you who follow every Samsung release, yes, the S95D also had a matte screen, but we weren't sent that TV, so bear with me as this is my first go with Samsung's glare-free tech. Aside from the matte screen, the F model uses an upgraded processor in the NQ4AI Gen 3. One thing that has not changed is the lack of Dolby Vision support. Samsung is also still hell-bent on incorporating its One Connect box, which houses all of the TV's guts, including its 4 HDMI 2.1 inputs. Don't get me wrong, I love how thin Samsung TVs are, but you still have to deal with all of the cable routing, not to mention figuring out what to do with the cumbersome box when wall mounting. Maybe I'm alone on an island when it comes to the One Connect box, but it always felt like a solution in search of a problem. My quibble with the One Connect box aside, Samsung gets bonus points for not making customers choose between HDMI 2.0 and 2.1 ports when it comes to making a connection, something I can't say about some of the other TVs we've reviewed. You also don't have to sacrifice one of your 2.1 compatible ports to ARC-E-ARC. This is a pretty big deal for gamers who own more than one gaming console. You won't have to prioritize if the PlayStation or Xbox gets the best connection. And sticking with the gaming theme, the S95F also features ALLM, VRR, Game Motion Plus, and FreeSync Premium Pro. The S95F is a 4K display, available in 4 sizes ranging from 55 to 83 inches. Now, you're seeing the 65-inch model here. Now, you can mount this TV on a wall or use the stand that comes with it, but for this review, I've chosen to mount the S95F to our canvas soundbar. The canvas lets me hide the One Connect box and makes a single HDMI connection between the TV's ARC-E-ARC enabled HDMI port and the canvas speaker a breeze. Now, Samsung uses Tizen for its operating system. You know I've never been a huge Tizen fan, and this iteration seems worse than even I remember. Feels more cumbersome, needlessly cute, and slow. The TV's remote also isn't what I would call a godsend during setup, which no doubt explains why Samsung really pushes you to download their SmartThings app as soon as you power on the TV. While Samsung continues to blaze their own path on a lot of fronts, I've yet to run into anyone who loves Tizen or who understands why Samsung continues to support Dolby Atmos, even wirelessly, by the way, with their own soundbars, but it still says, nah to Dolby Vision. What I wouldn't give to wake up one day and learn that Samsung has ditched the One Connect box and embraced Google TV and Dolby Vision, but I digress. Until then, Apple TV and my Xidu media server to the rescue. Now, out of the box, the S95F boots up in its Eco Picture profile. And like most energy-saving modes, this one measures poorly. It's not very bright, has a noticeable blue tint to both its grayscale and color. If you prefer a cool image, though, you may like the Eco profile. I know a lot of folks see a blue shift as a sign of clarity, which is fine. In fact, it's actually normal. It's just not accurate. Eco's delta E, or margin of error, for grayscale and color came in at 16 and 10 respectively. If you've seen any of our past TV reviews, you know that the magic number we're looking for, or delta E, is 3 or less if a TV is to be considered calibrated from the factory. While I tested both the standard and vivid profiles, you can go ahead and skip these if an accurate out-of-the-box image is what you're after. Both profiles measured pretty poorly, and the blue tint I mentioned earlier, it's even more prominent. For the best and most accurate image out of the box, you're going to want to choose the S95F's movie or filmmaker profile. Our review sample measured pretty much the same in either of these two profiles, with a delta E of 5 for grayscale and 2.8 for color. Now, I was a little surprised by these numbers, given how impressive these profiles look to my naked eye. Nevertheless, while color is considered accurate since it hit below 3, the grayscale and white point accuracy was just a bit out of bounds. Oh, and this was for both standard dynamic range as well as HDR. Thankfully, the S95F can be calibrated and calibrated easily. I used my light meter, VideoForge pattern generator, and SpectraCal software to calibrate this TV's filmmaker profile, and only had to perform very minor tweaks to its custom white point and color calibration menus in order to make the Samsung perfect. After calibration, the S95F's grayscale and color measured a delta E of less than 1, with a pretty much textbook EOTF tracking, meaning you're seeing the signal exactly how the creator intended, and that's whether watching SDR or HDR. As impressed as I was, though, by the S95F after a quick calibration, the before and after results probably aren't worth the fuss of a professional calibration for the majority of customers. If I didn't already own the expensive tools and possess the know-how to calibrate, I would just put this TV in its filmmaker profile and then turn the brightness up to taste. Speaking of brightness, the Samsung is plenty bright, especially for an OLED, and honestly, it's bright enough for most everyday viewing. Just know that it's not going to be, a light Canon like the TCL QM8K with its almost 4,000 nits. After calibration, I was getting a real-world brightness around 800 nits sustained when viewing standard dynamic range content, and peaks a little over 1,000 nits sustained when viewing HDR test patterns, which isn't bad. That said, real-world content like the newest Jurassic Park Rebirth looked a little bit lackluster compared to viewing the same content on the LG C5 OLED. This was especially noticeable if I wanted to have both an accurate HDR image and a bright one. The S95F forced me to prioritize one or the other, which was a little bit strange, given that it clearly can recreate bright highlights when needed. It just seems to sacrifice image accuracy, specifically grayscale purity, in the process. But when I wasn't chasing nits and instead I set the Samsung up so that both SDR and HDR content looked good and the viewing experience was comfortable in both light and darkened rooms, I was able to enjoy an adequately bright and accurate image. And if some of that sounded confusing, what I mean is if you try and push the S95F to its absolute maximum brightness, that blue shift I talked about earlier, straight out of the box, it kind of comes into play even if you calibrate. So by backing off the brightness a little bit, everything from the white point to the color accuracy just sits in better alignment. But setting all the nits and nerdy stuff aside, I absolutely love the image coming out of this TV. The matte screen isn't a gimmick either. In our living room, which is more or less a soft box of light by design, the image, especially its dynamic range, looked great, no matter where Christy and I sat to watch. Oh yeah, the viewing angle on the Samsung, best I've ever seen. 180 degrees of edge-to-edge perfection with no fall off in light uniformity or skew in color, no matter where you sit. And I'm talking even way, way, way off axis. As far as image color and light uniformity and DSE or dirty screen effect go, the Samsung is the most impressive TV I've seen. Colors look more three-dimensional in their contrast and gradation of subtle shadow and light, no doubt because the S95F uses a qd-oled panel and has almost complete coverage of the larger color spaces such as P3 and Rec 2020. Black and white contrast is also excellent. Blooming is very nicely controlled. However, the S95F doesn't appear to hit absolute black without some tweaking. And I noted this in my measurements too. It's not a deal breaker, but in some cases, especially when watching content in the 2:3:5:1 aspect ratio, the Sammy's lack of true black is going to be a little noticeable. With some adjustments to its setting post-calibration, you can get to true black. Just note that out of the box. The absolute darkest parts of a scene or game will be ever so slightly lifted. Beyond that, the image out of the S95F is very natural and organic. I found motion to be smooth, especially when gaming, of which the S95F is a tour de force. Gaming on the PS5 through the Samsung was amazingly vivid, with excellent detail and depth rendering, even in the face of chaotic gunplay and rapid whip pans, so A+ there. As great as this TV is, though, I think the biggest hurdle viewers will have to contend with when it comes to the Samsung is whether or not they like that matte screen. It's different. Now, I happen to love it, especially for daytime viewing with our window coverings open. One thing to note, though, is that because of the screen's matte finish, the content can appear more computer monitor-like than TV. You get used to it and frankly over it pretty quickly, but you may go through a short adjustment period. This means colors, highlights, and even shadows lack some of that, sheen one might be used to when viewing content on other OLEDs and even LED-based TVs. That sheen or lack thereof is especially noticeable when viewing dark scenes like those found in the series Wednesday or Stranger Things on Netflix. Content like this may not seem as rich or as weighty in the shadows as they appear on an LG or Sony, but keep in mind, I'm nitpicking. Additionally, while motion was good, the matte surface of the screen didn't do the Samsung's processing any favors, meaning subtle anomalies such as jaggies or banding were more noticeable and weren't either hidden or smoothed over by the presence of glass or a more glossy screen coating. These instances were few and far between, but as far as processing goes, especially when cleaning up or upscaling streaming or non-4K content, the Samsung would appear to be ever so slightly behind the curve compared to what I've seen from the likes of LG lately, and definitely a step behind what Sony has been dishing out this whole time. Now, I know I'm going to get some flack for this because the S95F is actually closer in price and pedigree to LG's G series of OLEDs than the C series, but I've yet to review the G, so you're getting a comparison to the C5 instead. At around half the price of a 65-inch model, the C5 is undoubtedly the better value for money. It's also more accurate right from the factory, meeting the standard of calibrated out of the box in its cinema, movie, or filmmaker profiles. The C5 can also get a little brighter and hits absolute black without any need for tweaks. The downside is its screen is more reflective, so if your room has a lot of ambient or bright light, those reflections can get tricky if you can't control the light in your room, especially as you start to move off axis. I'm going to say that the LG is the better TV in terms of value, ease of use, and accuracy upon purchase, and it's a TV I really, really like. But if your TV resides in a brightly lit room or you have a lot of people watching who need, the widest viewing angle, or if you just simply prefer Samsung's more subjective attributes, the S95F is definitely worth considering. We still use the now 3-year-old A95K OLED from Sony in our bedroom. It still works and looks great, but even Christy has been tempted to replace it with this Samsung. And I'm not gonna lie, I've even thought about it too. There's something intangible about the Samsung that I really love. The image made my jaw drop more than once. I can't say if it's the matte screen or if Samsung is just rendering the colors with greater definition compared to the older Sony. I just know that I like it, and sometimes that's all that matters. Now, by the time you're watching this review, we will have only just taken delivery of Sony's new Bravia 8 II OLED, so be sure to circle back for my full breakdown on how the Samsung S95F actually compares. Keeping it real with you, it's been a while since I've really liked a Samsung display. Last year's offerings, specifically their LED displays, were major disappointments. Even Samsung's early OLED models were a bit overhyped. Good, but maybe not as good as some OLED fanboys wanted them to be. Well, that was then, and this is now, and the F in the new S95F stands for fantastic. I love the image this TV puts out, and if there were an obtainable 98-inch model available, especially one that used the same panel as the one reviewed here, it would already be on my wall. So that's it. That is now my take on Samsung's S95F OLED TV. What did you guys think? What did you guys think? I know Samsung's hit or miss with me, but a lot of you guys really stand firm on Samsung OLED. So please let me know how I did. Share your thoughts. In the meantime, remember, the only person who has to like the sound, or this being a TV review, sight of your system is you. So happy listening, happy watching. Thank you for watching. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we will see you on the next video. Bye.